It was the summer of 1999, in the quiet coastal town of Warren, Rhode Island, when the disappearance of Emily Rhodes sent a chill through the humid air. Emily was 24, bright, outgoing, and deeply woven into the fabric of the town. She worked as a second-grade teacher at Maple Grove Elementary. Known for her warmth and her ability to make even the shyest students feel seen. Her life was simple and full. Morning runs along the waterfront, evenings spent with friends at the Anchor Cafe, and weekends visiting her parents' home just outside of Bristol. She was the kind of person everyone in town seemed to know. The friendly teacher with sun-streaked hair, a soft voice, and a contagious laugh that echoed through the school hallways. On the evening of July 10, 1999, Emily had plans with her close friend Hannah Carter. They were supposed to meet for dinner at a small seafood place by the harbor. Emily never showed up. At first, Hannah thought she was running late. But after an hour of unanswered calls and no reply to her pager, something Emily never ignored, Hannah grew uneasy. That unease turned to panic the next morning when Emily's green 2008 Toyota Corolla was found parked at a scenic overlook near the Palmer River Bridge, just 2 miles from her apartment. The driver's door was unlocked. Her purse was on the passenger seat and her sandals lay neatly beside the car, as though she'd taken them off herself. But Emily was gone. The Warren Police Department quickly launched a search, combing through the nearby woods, dragging the river, and calling in volunteers. For days, helicopters circled above. Dogs traced faint scents that led nowhere, and flyers with Emily's smiling face covered every utility pole from Bristol to Providence. Detective Mark Hendricks, one of the lead investigators, would later describe that first week as the kind of case that gnaws at you from the inside out, because nothing added up. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no witnesses who saw her leave the overlook. But one detail stuck out: a half-empty coffee cup found on the car's roof, its lid marked with a faint fingerprint. Investigators sent it to the state crime lab, but technology in 1999 was limited. The print wasn't clear enough to identify. In the following weeks, rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed Emily had gone for a walk near the river and accidentally fallen in. Others whispered about a secret relationship or someone she might have met online. Though in 1999, that world was still new, unfamiliar, and frightening to many. But to those who knew Emily best, the idea of her vanishing by choice made no sense. She had just signed a lease, just planned a field trip for her class. Hannah recalled in a 2003 local interview. She was happy. She was here. Months turned into years, and the case slowly faded from the headlines. Her parents never moved away. They kept the same house, the same phone number, hoping one day they'd hear her voice on the other end. Each year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, a candlelight vigil was held by the Palmer River. Her students, now grown, still remembered her, but beneath the surface, the case file of Emily Rhodes sat collecting dust. A stack of paper bound with a fading red string, holding the unanswered question that haunted Warren for more than 2 decades. What really happened that night by the river? It would take 26 years, a retired detective's persistence, and a confession no one saw coming to finally reveal the truth. A truth that would shake the town of Warren all over again. By 2024, the town of Warren had changed. The harbor had new shops, the roads were smoother, and most of the faces downtown were unfamiliar. But for those who had lived there long enough, the name Emily Rhodes still carried weight, a quiet sadness that lingered just beneath the surface. Her disappearance had become part of local folklore. Mentioned in whispers at diners or late-night conversations, Detective Mark Hendricks, now retired and in his early 60s, never truly left the case behind. He had moved into a small home overlooking the same river where Emily's car had been found. Some nights he would sit on his porch, staring at the water, replaying the details over and over in his mind. There were cases that ended, and there were cases that stayed with you. Emily's was the latter. Then one cold morning in January 2024, a phone call changed everything. It came from Detective Lisa Marino, one of the newer investigators in the Rhode Island State Police's cold case unit. She had been reviewing unsolved cases from the early 2000s and came across the Rhodes file. What caught her attention wasn't just the mystery. It was a note written in Hendricks' old handwriting, a simple line that read, "The fingerprint. Keep it. One day tech will catch up." Technology had caught up. For years, the fingerprint on Emily's coffee cup had been too faint to read. But with new digital enhancement methods developed in the 2020s, even degraded prints could now be scanned, re-imaged and cross-referenced with national databases in ways impossible decades ago. Marino reached out to Hendricks, and though he'd been retired for almost 10 years, he didn't hesitate. Together, they requested the evidence be reanalyzed. When the results came back, Hendricks said he felt his heart stop. The print matched to Michael Tanner, now 54 years old, a man who had once lived just a few blocks from Emily's apartment. Back in 1999, Tanner had been a familiar face around town, a local handyman often helping neighbors with repairs. He was quiet, polite, and forgettable in that way some people are. At the time, he had even volunteered in the same school where Emily taught, fixing classroom windows and playground fences. He was never considered a suspect. There was no record of conflict, no reported incidents, nothing that tied him to her disappearance. When Marino and Hendricks dug deeper, they discovered something else. In 2001, Tanner had left Rhode Island abruptly, moving to Vermont, and later to upstate New York. He'd been arrested twice for minor assault charges in the early 2000s, nothing serious enough to land him in prison, but enough to raise questions about his temper. With the fingerprint match confirmed, investigators obtained a search warrant for his current residence in Schenectady, New York. What they found sent shivers through everyone involved. In an old wooden box tucked away in his basement were a handful of items. A silver locket with the initials ER engraved on it, a faded school ID from Maple Grove Elementary, and a photo of Emily clipped from an old newspaper article. It wasn't hard evidence of murder, but it was enough to reopen the case. On March 3, 2024, the Rhode Island State Police officially reclassified the Rhodes case as an active homicide investigation. The announcement reignited memories for everyone who had known her, teachers, parents, friends, even former students who were now adults. The news spread fast, with local media running headlines like 25 years later, break in the disappearance of teacher Emily Rhodes. For Emily's parents, who were now in their late 70s, the call came early that morning. When they said they had a name, her father, Robert Rhodes, told reporters later, it felt like someone had opened a window after all these years in the dark. Over the next several months, Hendricks worked closely with Marino, reviewing every piece of the old file. Witness statements, old photos, timelines, everything was re-examined with a modern lens. The FBI provided forensic support, and using advanced soil analysis on fibers found in Emily's car, investigators traced them to a wooded area less than half a mile from Tanner's old rental property. Search teams were deployed to that property in April 2024. Beneath, a patch of dense overgrowth behind what used to be a tool shed, cadaver dogs alerted to possible human remains. Forensic anthropologists began digging carefully, layer by layer, until they found what they'd all hoped and dreaded to find. Fragments of human bone, a piece of jewelry, and buried nearby, part of a fabric pattern matching the floral dress Emily had been wearing the night she vanished. The remains were transported to the Rhode Island Medical Examiner's office. DNA testing took weeks, but in June 2024, the results confirmed what the Rhodes family had waited 25 long years to hear. The remains were Emily's. Detective Marino later said in a press briefing, her voice breaking slightly, "This case has haunted this community for a quarter of a century. Today we can finally say her name, and mean it in the past tense no more. Michael Tanner was arrested 2 days later outside his home in New York. The image of him being led away in handcuffs, gray hair, lined face, blank stare, would be etched into the memory of everyone who had followed the case. It was a moment that should have brought relief, but instead, it brought a flood of new questions. Why had he done it? What connection did they truly have? And what had really happened that summer night in 1999? Those answers, it turned out, would come only after Tanner decided to talk. By late June 2024, the Rhode Island authorities were preparing for the interrogation that could finally provide the missing pieces of Emily Rhodes's story. Tanner, sitting in a sterile interview room at the Providence Police Department, was calm, almost eerily so. At 54, he had aged considerably. The sharp edges of youth had softened, but the eyes still carried that unsettling detachment that some investigators had noticed when he was first questioned in 1999. Detective Lisa Marino and retired Detective Mark Hendricks entered the room. They placed the evidence on the table, the silver locket, the school ID, and the photographs. The case also served as a catalyst for innovation within Rhode Island's criminal justice system. The successful use of preserved DNA evidence from the 1999 investigation prompted legislators to allocate additional funding for forensic laboratories and the preservation of biological samples. Police departments across the state began digitizing case files, creating searchable databases to ensure that critical information would not be lost over time. These efforts reflected a broader shift in how law enforcement approached cold cases, from passive record-keeping to proactive investigation and continuous reevaluation. Nationally, Emily Rhodes's story became part of the growing body of evidence that modern technology can solve cases previously deemed unsolvable. Crime labs, investigative agencies, and law enforcement academies studied the case closely. The combination of DNA analysis, forensic examination, and genealogical research demonstrated that decades-old evidence, if preserved correctly, can yield life-changing results. Emily's case encouraged families across the country to advocate for the reopening of old cases, reinforcing the principle that time alone should never be a barrier to justice. For the Rhodes family, everyday life slowly returned to a rhythm that didn't revolve around uncertainty and fear. Robert and Margaret spent more time with their grandchildren, sharing stories about Emily's kindness, creativity, and curiosity. The memory of their daughter became a living lesson, teaching younger generations about resilience, empathy, and the importance of seeking truth. Community events celebrating Emily's life replaced those memorial vigils that had once been tinged with sorrow. Transforming grief into enduring remembrance, Detective Lisa Marino reflected. On the entire journey from 1999 to 2025, she noted that the success of the case was not just a triumph of science, but of human determination. Persistence matters more than people realize, she said. Each interview, each lab test, each review of old files, those small, seemingly inconsequential actions build up. You never know which one will finally break a case wide open. By mid-2025, the Rhodes case was officially closed, but its legacy continued to shape Warren. The town had learned painful lessons about trust, vigilance, and community responsibility. Families who had once felt isolated in their suffering now found solace in the knowledge that law enforcement, when persistent and innovative, could deliver long-awaited justice. Emily Rhodes's name became synonymous not only with tragedy, but with the enduring pursuit of truth. The story also served as a reminder to parents, educators, and law enforcement officers that no disappearance should ever be treated as a closed file until every possibility has been exhausted. Emily's case inspired the creation of a coalition of Rhode Island families, advocating for legislative support, better evidence preservation, and the prioritization of cold cases. Their work ensured that Emily's story would not fade, providing hope to countless others still searching for answers. In the quiet moments of 2025, Margaret Rhodes often sat in her living room, looking at a framed photograph of Emily on her graduation day. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating her daughter's smiling face. The ache of loss was still present, but it was tempered by justice served, and the knowledge that Emily's story had finally been told completely. Robert Rhodes, now retired and enjoying the calm after years of relentless searching, joined her, holding her hand silently. Together they reflected on the journey, the decades of unanswered questions, the heartbreak, and finally the resolution that allowed them to move forward without the constant weight of uncertainty. The Rhode Island cold case had taken 25 years to resolve, but its conclusion reaffirmed a timeless truth. Persistence, dedication, and the application of new technology can bridge even the longest gaps between crime and justice. Emily Rhodes's legacy lived on, not only in her family and the community that had mourned her, but also in the countless investigations that would benefit from the lessons learned in Warren. This case, like so many others across the country, became a symbol of hope for families still waiting, a testament that justice can prevail regardless of the years that pass. By late 2025, the full reverberations of the Emily Rhodes case were being felt far beyond Warren. What had begun as a single family's nightmare in 1999 had grown into a catalyst for systemic change in how cold cases were investigated across Rhode Island and the wider United States. Law enforcement agencies, academic institutions, and community organizations began taking a hard look at unresolved cases, inspired by the combination of persistence, advanced science, and meticulous record-keeping that had finally brought closure to the Rhodes family. The Rhodes family, still anchored in Warren, became active advocates for families of missing persons. Robert and Margaret Rhodes traveled to conferences and community forums, sharing their story with law enforcement professionals, social workers, and policymakers. They emphasized the importance of never giving up hope, of carefully preserving evidence, and of maintaining detailed records, no matter how hopeless a case might seem at first. Their message resonated deeply, touching not only law enforcement officials, but also ordinary citizens who wanted to support efforts to keep missing children and victims of violent crime in the public eye. Emily's younger brother, James Rhodes, who had been only 12 when his sister disappeared, now in his late 30s, helped launch a foundation in her memory. The Rhodes Foundation funded cold case investigations, provided grants for forensic technology in small police departments, and organized training sessions for officers to stay updated on the latest DNA, fingerprint, and genealogical methods. "Our goal is simple," James explained in an interview with a local news outlet. "We want every family to have the chance to see justice, no matter how many years have passed." In Warren, the local police department took concrete steps to institutionalize the lessons learned from the Rhodes case. The department expanded its cold case unit, dedicating full-time detectives and analysts to review unsolved cases from the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. Every lead, no matter how small, was systematically tracked and revisited with modern tools. Evidence that had once been neglected, improperly stored, or overlooked was now catalogued in a secure, climate-controlled facility. Officers received training on the latest forensic methods, including advanced DNA sequencing, trace fiber analysis, and digital genealogy searches. The community itself underwent a subtle but profound transformation. Awareness campaigns educated residents on the importance of reporting suspicious behavior, preserving potential evidence, and supporting families through public vigilance. Citizen watch groups were formalized, linking residents with local law enforcement in ways that encouraged trust and cooperation. Annual town meetings now included cold case updates, providing transparency and maintaining community engagement. The Rhodes case became a touchstone in civic education, a reminder that persistent inquiry and collective vigilance could make a real difference. Nationally, Emily Rhodes's story entered law enforcement textbooks, academic courses, and training modules. Police academies highlighted the case as an example of the power of combining traditional detective work with modern forensic technology. Criminal justice professors used it to teach students about the importance of preserving evidence over decades, the role of genealogical research in solving cold cases, and the emotional and psychological endurance required to sustain such investigations. Emily's case illustrated that even when resources are limited and the trail grows cold, a methodical approach combined with technological innovation can ultimately bring answers. Media coverage continued well into 2025, but with a focus that extended beyond sensationalism. True crime documentaries, podcasts, and news specials examined the societal impact of the case, not only the tragedy of Emily Rhodes's disappearance, but also the community-wide lessons learned and the systemic reforms inspired by the investigation. Journalists highlighted the collaborative nature of the resolution. Local police, federal agencies, forensic laboratories, and everyday citizens working in tandem over decades. The coverage reinforced the notion that cold cases were not forgotten, but rather opportunities waiting for the right combination of persistence, expertise, and timing to yield justice. For the Rhodes family, life settled into a rhythm defined by remembrance and advocacy. Robert and Margaret continued their daily rituals honoring Emily, including tending to the memorial garden and reviewing photographs. James and other family members worked tirelessly to ensure that other families in similar situations would not experience decades of uncertainty without hope. The local schools incorporated Emily's story into civics and social studies lessons, teaching students about the real-life consequences of crime, the importance of community vigilance, and the ways science and persistence can intersect to solve mysteries once thought unsolvable. Psychologically, the town of Warren experienced healing on multiple levels. Residents who had lived for years with unease and suspicion learned to rebuild trust in their community. Families who had once feared speaking out about suspicious individuals gained confidence in reporting concerns, knowing that thorough investigation and modern forensic methods could make a difference. Counseling services, often utilized by families affected by Emily's disappearance, now included proactive workshops on resilience, grief processing, and advocacy, helping communities recover from the ripple effects of unsolved crime. The lessons of Emily Rhodes's case also resonated with law enforcement agencies nationwide. Departments in neighboring states reviewed their own cold case files, revisiting unresolved disappearances and homicides with fresh eyes and updated technology. The case inspired interdepartmental collaboration, with agencies sharing databases, forensic resources, and genealogical networks to cross-reference evidence from decades-old investigations. Emily's case became a symbol of what was possible when patience, science, and dedication converged, a beacon of hope for families still waiting for answers across the United States. By the end of 2025, more than a year after Michael Tanner's conviction, Emily Rhodes's legacy had fully extended into the community, the state, and the nation. Families of missing persons reported feeling inspired to advocate for their loved ones. Local police departments had refined investigative protocols, and law enforcement education now included case studies demonstrating the combination of old-fashioned detective work and modern science. Emily's story became a cornerstone in the ongoing battle against unsolved crimes, showing that closure and justice can be achieved even after decades of uncertainty. For Robert and Margaret Rhodes, the culmination of 26 years of searching, hope, and despair provided a profound sense of peace. While nothing could erase the pain of losing their daughter, the conviction of her killer and the knowledge that Emily's story had transformed lives and systems across the country offered a lasting form of justice. James Rhodes reflected, We can't bring Emily back, but we can make sure no other family has to wait in silence for decades. Her story can change the world one case at a time. The Rhode Island cold case, now fully resolved, stands as a testament to human perseverance, scientific advancement, and the enduring power of community. Emily Rhodes's life, though tragically cut short, continues to inspire families, investigators, and communities to never give up on seeking the truth. Her legacy reminds everyone that justice may be delayed, but with dedication, patience, and modern tools, it is never truly denied. The story of Emily Rhodes is not merely about a tragic loss. It is about the power of persistence, the importance of technological innovation in criminal justice, and the unwavering commitment of a family and community to see justice done. It underscores the idea that every unresolved case holds within it the potential for resolution, and that time, while challenging, is not an insurmountable barrier to truth. Families, law enforcement, and communities across America continue to look to Emily's story as a model of hope, resilience, and the ultimate triumph of justice.